ways to do that is to do so without sacrificing the commercial, meaning you stack residential on commercial. I know of buildings, in fact, I own a building that does have a residential use inside a commercial building within the CRA district. To get to that point, even with an existing two-story building, you're going, if it doesn't currently fall in that category, you have to go through some pretty substantial renovations. It would be my thought that really the intention is or should be to focus this grant specifically on the marrying of residential and commercial in a single structure, not new construction versus reconstruction or redevelopment of an existing structure, but again, focused on that, the desirability of having those two uses coming together and the recognition that there is substantial expense in bringing those two uses together. And so my thought would be, I think the Commissioner Fairclough's point would be to just simply allow this grant to be for redevelopment, new construction, doesn't matter, vacant piece of land, existing building, but the goal being to take a property where you don't currently have residential and commercial coexisting and putting them together. And that grant specifically focused on those additional costs that come along with that marriage.
And he's right. This is addressing one specific thing. It's like a lot of cities, they have one where they have a grant if you're just doing a restaurant. And that grant covers if you're just going to do a restaurant. Whereas this one, because we are trying to build residential downtown, this one is if you're going to do your commercial residential, and it will cover everything on that aspect.
And I would say to your point, that you could just add to build or improve an existing building, which if we want to do it that way, if we want to not require building a new structure, but taking an existing structure and turn it into a mixed use. We could add those words and then it would be more broad.
If it's not in the master plan, can we add it on this?
The master plan
Yeah,
is
it's
a
a
broad
guide, yeah.
idea and it's vaguely worded and it's done it way for a purpose. This is meant to be very specific.
I
So,
just-
yeah,
yeah.
I think that we certainly can make this more specific on each grant.
Okay, all right, so where were you talking about? If y'all want me to, I can add that.
What if you said, excuse me, what if you said plan to develop in the CRA area? Make it simple instead of having or. Have it say, for potential investors who plan to develop in the CRA area, comma, a building design. That way it's either redevelopment or building.
Or development.
Or,
Develop.
instead of like,
The word
or,
develops pretty broad.
or. And that way you've got it, if they're either gonna develop, they're either gonna build it from the ground up or they're going to remodel. I didn't wanna have develop in the redevelopment area because that's kind of, but if you develop in the CRA area, period.
So what she's proposing is that we change that where it says investors who plan to build in the redevelopment area, we change that to who plan to develop in the
In the CRA.
in the CRA. Which it's covered over here, but that's still kind of,
Well, I think the broader question is, you're okay with taking an existing building and turning that into mixed use? And to be able to get this
I don't
grant,
think
as long
that-
as they spend.
$250,000, yeah. I'm for that,
yeah.
Mr. President.
Yeah, go ahead and say.
I'm in agreement with that. If somebody's gonna invest that, they got that limit what they have to meet to, even consider applying for it, and I think that will only be, politically correct or sound judgment use.
How do y'all want me to word it? I can change it. I'm not 100% sure where y'all want.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think maybe we could focus today on, rather than trying to give her specific rewording, because that can be hard on the fly. I think what she really needs, and I think what we're giving her is just kind of this broad feedback as to how these needs to be focused. And I suspect she could probably wordsmith these in assistance with Ms. Leone to kind of, and Ms. Roy to get those kinks worked out and then bring back revised language without us
I
having to
agree
get
that
too
the
far into
workshop
those
is,
weeds.
is to set the framework and.
Okay, all
place it in
right,
the
we'll
legal
just
way.
redo that. Okay, all right.
Anybody else have any comments? 'Cause I have one question. It's a little confusing to me at the very top. Maximum funds available. Maximum funds available, what are they?
I left it blank because we were going to suggest 25,000, and then that blank, we'll fill that in when y'all decide how much.
No, but
do you mean?
I'm not communicating. I mean,
I'll say,
25,000 this grant, or how much do we have available in the budget for this?
No, this
Particular.
grant, this is how much they can apply for. It's like with the facade
Okay.
grants, the maximum money they can get.
I got that. I want to know how much we have budgeted for mixed-use residential,
We-
commercial in our annual budget.
We've got one huge bucket of money. We don't have, we're not separating these out. We've got
Well,
one.
we always
hu-
have.
We did last year, but I didn't think the year before.
Well, if the board wants to decide how much they want to allocate to each one,
That's up to you.
that's their the way to do it.
The reason I was,
Because it might guide you better.
I'm not saying we have to do it, I'm just saying in the past, I think we said, we have so much in this pot of money for this grant, so much in this pot of
Yeah.
money. You're saying,
what I would
Not
like to
gonna do it that way.
Well, and the reason I'd like to do one big bucket is because we're doing this on first come, first served basis. And if nobody applies for the asbestos grant, then that money's sitting there and it's not being used, but we may run over on applications for something else, like ADA compliant. Yes, we can redo the budget, but if we just have one big bucket for our grant money and it's spent as first come, first served with whoever needs it, then when it's gone, it's gone. That way we're not limiting. If y'all want me to limit it like I did before, we can.
I'm not recommending that,
Yeah. I just
was
wanted to have one
asking
big
'cause in the
bucket.
past, we've had that, and we don't wanna borrow from buckets, we wanna keep one bucket.
I just think it would be better to have one big bucket, to
Okay.
be honest with you. But if y'all want me to change it, we
Have a big
can.
bucket?
It's CRA grant bucket. It's full of money.
Commissioner Fairclough?
I may have misunderstood, but a few minutes ago, I think you said 250-something thousand, and if all of the applicants got a grant, we could still had enough to cover it. What, is that what we're talking about?
No.
The bucket right now, the bucket, on our application, the CRA grant and incentive bucket, all of it together with including the money we've already committed has, it's gonna have about $274,000 and 240. That's the money that's in the bucket.
Okay.
And if we awarded one of all these 5 grants this year, just one of each of them, that's just gonna spend $115,000. We've still got well over $250,000 left, or $150,000 left. So there's plenty of money in the bucket. I just didn't want, no, I shouldn't say that too loud. But there's, yeah.
CRA administrator has,
I think at the top, what we can do, and Alicia and I will work on this, is doing matching funds available, 25,000 per matching grant, and that might just clear it up rather than just adding that one little word in there, or per grant application, or for whatever. But we'll work on that language when we bring them back in September, make it a little clearer.
is everybody clear on the first grant? No, go ahead, Ms. Blocker.
Well, concurring kind of what Bishop just advised there, but I think we ought to lock in a maximum amount of that grant, period.
That's the
So
deal.
that applicant will know what they can work with or minus that. But we ought to lock in a figure, maximum, I'm saying.
Well, and like the person that's filling out this application, they are locked in. They're
That's what
locked
I'm
in at
talking about.
25,000.
Exactly. They are locked
Yeah,
in.
they're locked in. It's just we're not locked in as a CRA board of how much money we can give out of the bucket for this specific grant.
We need to
That's-
lock that in. That's what I'm getting
Okay,
at.
okay, for per application or as many people
Applicant,
Yeah, applicant is locked in at 25,000.
25,000, period.
They can't get more than 20. Each application cannot get more than $25,000 for this one application. But if let's say we got 10 people wanting fill in these applications, then we're not limited. But we only have money for 5 applications. But we've got 10 applications that come in want this money for improvement. Then we're not limited to only awarding 5 applications because we've got this bucket of money that nobody's been using, and we can distribute it as we see fit.
Another thing, point is, I failed to find the time factor between applicant one may make a application for a grant, how long before we can make a second application? I don't find that locked in nowhere.
Well, there's really, if it's on the same building, there really is no, because one person may want 3 applications for one building. There is not, if they've got, not, and he has a point on, if you want a second application for this exact same grant, I think it's 3 years. I think I saw it listed in the plan is 3
But
years.
we ought to have some guidelines here to finalize this out now.
Well, and I'll research that. I think in the plan, it said they can only get one grant, same type grant, every 3 years. But we will double check that. I think I read
Check
that.
that, Dr. Leone. Thank you.
We need to cover that.
Okay,
Good point.
yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because I did think of that, but I forgot about it, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blocker.
Thank you.
All right, are we ready to move on to the second grant?
Now, the second grant is a little bit different. The others are gonna be kind of like this one, but this is asbestos incentive grant. And how this one's different is, and this was just, asbestos is usually when somebody buys a building, they kind of expect there may be asbestos, but it may be a surprise they don't know about. And I would just like to suggest that we have a max incentive of $5,000 for asbestos mitigation, non-matching. Because these buildings are old, and I would like to suggest that. And it's just simple asbestos mitigation on removal, research, testing, and removal of asbestos. And I'd just like to suggest 5,000 non-matching.
Comments, questions? Commissioner Fairclough?
I would suggest that, considering the multiple application for grants, that this one is no refills. Like you get on your medicine bottle, no refills. You put in for one, you get it, that's it,
Per building or just forever?
forever.
So if somebody owns 10 buildings
Oh,
downtown?
no, wait a minute, no.
Oh, okay. You talking about
No, I'm talking about the same guy owning, this building. He could, when this one's done, or the one he's applied for and got this grant, I don't see any problem with helping him on a second building.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I'm-
all the grants, you can only get one grant per building.
Okay,
You-
I thought you said a while ago there was a 3-year waiting period before you
Oh,
applied.
you're talking about forever. Oh, okay. I was thinking about, yeah, and that's, I was thinking about 3 years, like say somebody has a building and they do it and they've got the asbestos grant on it. They can't apply for another asbestos grant for 3 years on that building. So you're saying just, they can never get another asbestos grant?
Not on that building.
Not on that building, okay. Up to you. Because it's non-matching, is that why you're saying that it is non-matching?
Right.
And they should have it all mitigated at that
If
time?
they don't have a dog in the fight, what do they care?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good point.
All right, Commissioner Haynes.
Mr. President, so make sure I understand correctly what Mr. Fairclough is saying. You're saying if it's the same building, they get one shot and that's it for that one building. If a veteran comes in and wants to buy 5 buildings, and they find asbestos in all 5 buildings,
He can get a grant for the other
get
ones.
a grant for other.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want
Yeah.
to make sure, that they would have an opportunity if they decide to buy half a block or a block.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they decide that they want to do whatever to that, because that's what investors normally do.
Oh.
Heavy investors, they'll come in and buy just a whole block and say, we're going to do the whole block. And if,
Yeah.
that's why I want to make sure that, what I'm seeing is that we're trying to grow. And we don't want to be a stumbling block for people who might want to come in and invest. And we're providing opportunity there for them to say, okay, you putting skin in the game, we're going to put some in there too.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to make sure that we, in this grant process, that we let out to the people who might want to invest. You know, we're willing to do something for you, but you have to make a worthwhile effort to what you're doing to improve this area.
Yeah, and I agree. Kind of an example, I think we were going to kind of explain it better. Somebody can apply for a facade grant for one building, and then 3 years later, they can get another facade grant if they want, if we limit it to 3 years for the same building. That gives them a 3-year time span. If somebody's going to do asbestos mitigation on a building and they're redeveloping that building, well, they're obviously going to put money in that building after they get the removal of asbestos. So they have got skin in the game, and that's why if they're doing the mitigation on that building, I think what you're saying, it should already be done. They shouldn't come back later and say, oh, I found more asbestos. Well, we gave you money for it at that time for that building. But yes, they can get, if they buy 5 buildings, they can get asbestos mitigation grant for all buildings. Once they find out, there's another thing about this one that's different. This one is given after the construction's done. This is the only one that is, they've got the test ran and they've done the mitigation. And, I mean, was it before that? I'm sorry, I'm sitting there
No, they
losing.
have to have the asbestos has to be removed and done and certified that it is out of the building
Yes.
before they get this money.
Yeah, I was confusing myself, but like on the second page, on the application of this page, at the bottom it says attach before and after photos of each area in its current condition. So this is the one where you do have to submit before and after. You have to prove that the asbestos has been removed, and you get the full funds for this. But it is per building. But yes, I agree. I think once we do one building, then it should be done. The mitigation should have been done on that building, and it should be complete. If they find any more after that, yeah, I think it's on their own. I agree.
Mr. Chairman, If I may,
Yes,
two,
go ahead.
two things. One, has anyone else ever wondered what that little dangly thing is on the bottom of the C in Facade? 'Cause I don't know. I was just sitting there.
It shows
Finally,
up on
I
the
looked it up.
computer.
It's called a cedilla,
Cedilla.
and it makes that C soft instead of hard. No idea. All this time. I went to Baker High School. No idea.
Only
So,
Nathan would find that out.
French, yes.
It's a French word, that's you have to
It's-
soften the C.
That is entirely interesting
You
to me.
soften the C with a cedilla.
There we go. And then two, so I think kind of thinking about I think we should always kind of focus on what's like the policy goal of each one of these
Yes.
grants. I think so with the asbestos grant, it is going to be to kind of help a developer or a small business owner, or a building guy, someone who's buying a building is reaching out and kind of stretching to try and do something good. They come across this unexpected thing, which technically, according to statute, they should be looking for, and when they find it, they should be remediating it, and that's not the type of cost that you can really take into account in your bank loan requests. And so those kind of jump up. It could be a project inhibitor. So I think the goal being to help to get that out of the way for folks. So the non-matching on that end, I think, is very prudent. On the backside, to Commissioner Fairclough's point, you don't want to encourage folks to not fully mitigate. And if you could come back and have a second bite at this apple, then you might try and find a way to break your mitigation into pieces and thereby leave asbestos in the building. And so I think then it should be because of that, again, looking at what the policy goal should be, it should be a one-time. So I fully support that.
And should we
limitation.
not put that in the guidelines here then?
We will put it in the guidelines, yes, we will
I
add that.
think we should put in there that it has to be fully inspected to show 100% asbestos free before they can buy that.
Mhm.
Or as close as you can get.
Dr. Leone,
Do we want some time limit as to how long ago they did the asbestos removal? I mean, if we're doing it prior asbestos removal? Or if someone says, hey, I did
good point,
this
good.
10
I did it 10 years ago, I'd like to.
Well, and my thoughts are that, we didn't have this grant available 10 years ago. We've got it available now. So it's going from the point that they approved these grants forward. And that's my thought. Nobody can say, well, I did this 10 years ago. This grant was not available 10 years ago. It's available now. So that would be my thought. That's why they can't retroact it. But we can put in here, no retroactive.
We want, part of the purpose is to make it clear to someone who's reading this for the first time, if they're eligible or not, so.
Because the way it's worded, it can be done after the fact.
No.
10 years ago was after the fact. No,
Well, but the grant wasn't available 10 years ago. It's available now.
Let's make it perfectly clear.
Hey, I'm with y'all. We can put that in there if y'all are okay with that.
What's the policy goal of the retroactive nature? Why are we making this one specifically to allow them to apply after the funds have been expended?
Really isn't one?
Okay, so I think there may be one, and what I was hoping your answer would be that when you get midstream into a construction project, and then all of a sudden you find asbestos and you determine it's got to be mitigated before you can move forward, and the CRA says you have to get a grant approved before you can do the work, and then you have a project that has a time schedule and money that's associated with it, and it's now at a complete standstill for 30 to 60 days as you wind your way through the governmental approval process. So if there were to be a policy objective to allowing a retroactive application, I think that's why it would be, because this is typically or possibly going to be a challenge that's going to be encountered during the construction process.
Surprise.
And so I would put I would say it should not be retroactive beyond the date that this grant is officially created by this body, if and when that happens. And two, I would place some reasonable time limits on the application after the completion or discovery of the asbestos, whatever you want to tie it to. And I'd make that a relatively tight window, say 30, 60, 90 days, something to that effect, so that all of your evidence is relatively recent in time to make sure that they met the grant requirements.
And in saying that, there is some work being done, and they had to remove asbestos, and they had to do it right then to go further.
Can't go any further, yeah.
So they can't go any further, so they've already done that. So they've asked if they can apply for the asbestos grant removal, or the asbestos grant. And my thoughts are, I think they should be able to, because we don't want them to have to wait for our grant review board to meet and all that to get this done. That delays progress. Anything we can do to keep from delaying progress, I think we should do.
Go ahead, Commissioner Gotti.
We want to make absolutely sure that the asbestos is out there before anybody moves into that building.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah. That's why I think this is very important incentive, and a lot of people didn't even know it was out there. And I really would like to promote this, because these older buildings do have it, and to move forward, they need to get it removed. Let's see if
Go
there's-
ahead, Commissioner Cox.
Yes, one thing if someone gets their, and anyone should be assuming that they would find it in a building, in any of the buildings. It's there. Maximum 5,000. Okay, so the guy gets and does mitigation, but maybe it's a partial mitigation. He gets some recompensation there and then sells the building. And the new owner discovers that there's more there.
Then
What
that's a
would that
different application, a
scenario
different
be?
owner. That's a different application, different owner. And that's what we need to put in here, though, because we did specify per building. But if we're going, you know, and that's a good point, because we did say per building, but it could be per building, different owner. Or per building unless it has a different owner.
That could come up.
It could, you're right, and like I said, it could easily come up. And the reason I picked 5,000 is just because of one recently been done. And it was about 5,500, and I was like, can you cover the 500? And yeah. So at 5,000, I thought was a good price. If y'all want to increase it, that's up to y'all, but that's a good point. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, would you?
Because my thing, what was going through my mind was, is we do the asbestos mitigation for those who have already gone through the grant review process. They're already in the pipeline. We've already said they can only do 3. But they've already got 3, this is a 4. This should be exempt from the 3 limits, because they may get
That's a good idea.
They may get the 50, the development, and they may get the ADA, and they may get the facade, and then they start digging out that front of the building, and like, oh my gosh, there's
Yeah.
asbestos.
Asbestos is a unique grant
So then they have
application.
to
It's
stop,
going to
they
be
have to do the
excluded.
That's not
asbestos.
you.
Well, with, you know, somebody who's already, all they're gonna ask for is the asbestos. Do we want them to already be a part of the grant process before they can apply for this asbestos grant?
Mr. Chairman. Did you want to recognize him
Yeah,
first?
Mr. Steele, you have.
I was just want to say, remember, remediation don't always mean removal.
Sir.
Because just like the building I am, we're encapsulating asbestos flooring in the building that I'm in right now. So just keep that in mind as you're going through this process. You may want to consider
That's true.
offering that grant to someone who comes in there after they've sold it and finds it and wants to do something else. If they're remodeling, changing the flooring structure or whatever.
Well, and it could be, and he's got a point, you know, it could be one person decides, you know, mediation and gets, but it's max incentive of 5,000. And if they're going to encapsulate it and just do the test on it, they're not going to get all 5,000. So if somebody comes in, they buy the building and they want it removed, then, and my thoughts are, if that's a new owner.
Different owner.
It's a different owner, different application. But I can see one owner can't have 2 asbestos removals, but maybe a different owner can have an asbestos removal.
Mr. Fairclough, you have something first.
I don't think we will get to the second owner, because as was stated a few minutes ago, this grant is going to be available to people that have already completed the mitigation. Now, if he's halfway through cleaning it all up and he decides to sell the building, he still hasn't gotten any money from the CRA.
Yeah, but the point that Mr. Steele was making, though, like say you bought a building and you discovered there's asbestos, but instead of removing it, you're just going to encapsulate it.
No,
And
no, that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I was addressing Mr. Cox's complaint.
Oh, okay.
About a guy getting the grant and then only doing half of the mitigation and selling the building. He's not going to have the money to do half
He
of it.
had no
He's
proof
gonna
that he
have to-
mitigated.
Then
Because he had no proof that he mitigated.
Right.
yeah, then he's not going to get the money. But the person coming behind him can get the money.
Well, yes, but after he does the mitigation.
Yeah, and you can get, the thing about the asbestos, it is rewarded after mitigation. Yeah, this is rewarded after mitigation. This one is a unique one. It is after the work's already done. Everything else, we have to approve the work before it you know, can be done. This one is after the fact, because, like I said, we don't want to stop progress. And, yeah, and if y'all notice on the second page of the actual application, the checklist at the bottom is a little bit different too. We're going before and after photos, and then we have to have a copy of an invoice from a licensed contractor showing the cost of the mitigation. So we have to have a proof that the contractor's already done the work on this one.
Mr. Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Only thing that's coming to my mind right now, which I just lost a thought, But,
Welcome to my world.
is this gonna, would we wanna consider this, as being an exception to the other grants? Since like I said, if somebody hits the 3 limit, would this be an exception to that since it's so unique, with that? Would it still
I think it's
qualify
kind of-
if you went to that, making it 4?
I think it's kind of CRA
That's what-
administrator was
Yeah,
saying.
that's what she's,
Yeah,
and I,
that's
very
something
well
that you
could.
may-
Yeah, she
and
was saying
somebody-
that, we never did say anything
Yeah.
on it.
yeah, well, that's true. I mean, like I said, I honestly, I think that's a great idea, because
But we
somebody
as
could have
a
already
board-
gotten
Mr.
awarded the
President,
other.
we as a board did never say anything based, she made the comment,
Yeah.
but we never did say, okay, let's go with that plan, or forget that plan, or whatever. I'm just looking for resolution from us, or are we gonna accept what, Ms. Roy said, or?
I said, we're
Are we gonna do
take
something
all these
different?
ideas and rework all these things and bring them back for approval in September, so all that will be worked into.
Yeah.
Well, if
If
we're not
y'all
gonna
want it,
go
but
for
they
it, we
didn't
should,
approve-
we
they didn't
shouldn't have
say.
to waste your time, though. You see what I'm saying, Mr.
That's what you're
President?
saying.
If we say, well, we're not gonna really think about that or do anything about that anyway, then she shouldn't waste her time trying to bring back something back to us. But if she gets consensus for it to
Yeah.
consider that, then I could say she bring a proposal back to us so we can look at it. That's just me.
Anybody object to that change?
President.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Walker.
Asbestos. I've dealt with that for years and years with Eglin. And when you see asbestos, that don't never go away. That's prioritized. So you don't get rid of it. You control it. But in the stipulations, we need to make sure and cover our tracks in this. But this asbestos, because I can take you to some places, what have you, in our history, documentations of how that can affect you years after it was supposed to have been removed. So what is general discussion here, going back, you
But-
don't never get rid of it.
Well, and you're right. And there's, if y'all look under the introduction, that last sentence where midway says, terms and condition are all at the discretion of CRA board and can be changed without modification to CRA plan. In other words,
True.
even if y'all, we didn't cover something in this, but somebody can still petition to have the change. So if we overlook something or there's a unique scenario that we did not think about, then fortunately that's in here, the board has a discretion to change or add if need be on these.
But back to Commissioner Hayes' input there.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a consensus to go ahead and list this as an exception to the
The
three
grant limit.
three grant rule?
Yes.
Anybody have any objection to that? All right, let's
Okay.
put that on your list of things to do over there.
I'm running out
All
of
right, we
writing
done
room, guys.
with asbestos? No, we'll never be done with it. will we?
No. According to Mr. Blocker, we'll never be done with asbestos.
All right, next
Okay.
one.
The next one is the building code compliance upgrade, and I've already gotten several people that are interested in this one. And the main thing about this one, there's nothing really different in it in building codes. It's just to encourage people that want to develop their buildings and do more. A lot of them can't because it's so costly to do the upgrades, to do an elevator, to do a sprinkler system or something if they want to expand. So that's the purpose of this one in the ADA bathrooms. And this is to help them, make the building code compliant and help cover that cost and encourage the growth that way through this grant. I have suggested the maximum funds available for this grant is $25,000. Matching.
Mr. President,
Go ahead, Dr. Lewis.
thank you. Shouldn't we have a minimum amount that they should spend before we tell them the maximum is 25, just like you did for the first one?
Well, they have, the minimum is 25,000 because it's a matching grant. So because it's 25,000 matching, their minimum is at least 25,000. So we're only paying 50% of what they're paying. So since it is a matching grant, their minimum is 25,000. The only reason the commercial development one was so much is because it's almost like building a new building. And these aren't necessarily building a new building. Somebody could just be adding bathrooms. And they're only 40,000. Well, then of course they're only going to get 20,000 of the matching grant, but they've already got 20 in it. So if we limit this to a large max, then we're going to exclude some people that just want to upgrade their bathrooms. That's my thought on that.
If I can address the grants themselves don't have to be 25,000. If you're going to put new carpet in and that's your upgrade, or new tile, and it costs you $5,000, then you get $2,500 or $5,000 from half of it from the city. You don't have to, like the facade grant now, it's up to $25,000, up to
$10,000.
$10,000. It's not,
Right.
they don't have to do the $25,000 worth of work. They have to do up to $25,000 worth of work. So it's, if we get 3 people who want a, $7,500 grant, then we got more grant money to give away. If we get one that needs a $25,000, then we've got one to give away. So it doesn't necessarily, when the grant review board gets the information, then that's when that's what will determine the amount of the grant, not the maximum amount that's available.
That's just the most we will award them. They could spend 75,000,
But
but they're only gonna get 25,000, but they at least have to spend 25,000 because it's matching, so they have to put in 25,000.
Actually, they have to.
So there really, yes, there is a maximum that they have to spend, and that's matching that.
Commissioner Boyle, I see a question on your face.
Thank you. Well, let me just following up on Dr. Rose's point. I think that maybe where she's driving at is we did set a minimum expenditure requirement of $250,000 in the mixed use / commercial development incentive. So there must have been a policy objective that we were trying to achieve by setting a minimum total expenditure on that one, and there must have been a likewise policy objection for not setting a minimum on this building code compliance upgrade. I think to the latter, the answer is just like you said, that we've got a lot of baseline objectives that we need to obtain in the CRA district, and I think really that's kind of the genesis of the facade grant with the C with the little dangly thing, is that we wanted people to have awnings because we didn't even have awnings covering our sidewalks anymore in downtown Crestview. And that's been somewhat successful. Most folks have gotten on board, maybe not everybody, but most folks. So the same thing with this latter grant, the idea being we still got some minimum baseline things like ADA compliance, and ADA is no longer really kind of cutting edge. It's actually kind of been around a while at this point. And so we really need to help these buildings get up to the kind of that minimum baseline standard. And if we set a minimum expenditure, you're going to exclude the vast majority of the folks coming into the district. Conversely, because we're driving at because you can get into the others, because the I guess the entry level fee is so low in that grant, and let's say for example the asbestos grant, you really, in order to kind of ratchet up and start to get some big money out of the CRA, you need to show that you're putting in some big money, and you need to really be achieving some core big picture objective of the district, like for example getting this mixed use kind of to seed its way through the district. And so I think that's probably your justification point on both ends for having it on the front, not having it on that ladder.
Thank you.
Great program.
What he said.
I mean, it would be really nice if you had 5 people getting 5,000 as opposed to 1 getting 25 because
Yeah.
they're upgrading. It's like
Yeah.
the facade grants, if we have 3 people getting 10,000 instead of, 1 getting 30, you get more bang for your buck with just doing the smaller amounts.
And we,
Commissioner Hayes, you have a question?
Just a comment, Mr. President, thank you. And as what they're saying with this, to help people things, because I would probably venture to say, I might be incorrectly, I would say probably about 90 to 99% of the buildings are not handicap accessible. I don't really know without looking at them, but this would be one thing that you could consider helping somebody with that, because it benefits not only that person, but it benefits all the consumers who might want to get into a facility to utilize it. And maybe we don't have that. I don't walk downtown looking to see if handicap can get in there or not, but I venture to say it's a large quantity that can't really get in there to meet those requirements.
And I would just add to that also code compliance can really be talking about safety as far as electric or different types of things like that. So this is another reason, a policy reason why we want to encourage people to comply with the codes and requirements. And so not having an initial expenditure investment amount that would allow them to be able to apply is a good thing on this particular grant.
Any other comments, questions on this grant? Okay?
All right, the next one is just the commercial investor property. Is similar to the residential commercial investor, except for this is just a commercial investor. You do not have to have a residential property on your building. You're just an investor wanting to come in and upgrade and improve a building. This one is kind of generic. It kind of covers a lot of things. It's just a commercial investor that is building the downtown area and is trying to develop our downtown area. And it does say that it would like to support a 18-hour workday downtown. So this one does specify that the purpose of this incentive is to attract commercial development that will support 18-hour workday in the downtown area and is used for residential or commercial development in restaurants and grocery stores. The purpose of this one, and that's what I'm kind of wanted to ask y'all about, it really says, so if somebody comes in and their business does not support an 18-hour day, can they not apply for this grant? Because this specifically in the master plan said it has to be an 18-hour day investment.
Go ahead,
Mr.
Commissioner Hayes.
President, yeah, when I looked at that, it hit me 18 hours, and I was trying to think, what business around here is open 18 hours a day?
Well, that's what we're trying to encourage.
Other than
but yeah.
Walmart's, Walmart's is open, but I'm trying to, and I was trying to think, how many citizens would come down here, basically looking in the middle of the night, if you do 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock at night, and then to 12, that, I didn't understand the time frame that we're looking at the business. I can understand that, me, myself, I wouldn't come in making a promise that I'm gonna stay open 18 hours. Cause it's probably not feasible. I'll probably go bankrupt, until the business
Yeah.
steady. But I'm just curious, so maybe somebody can answer me, what type of 18-hour business would we basically have? I'm just
Restaurants,
curious.
bars, anything. This was written this way in the master plan. And that's why I wanted to ask y'all if y'all wanted to remove the 18-hour workday from this grant
Well, that's what I
application.
want to ask Dr. Leone, is that something we can do without violating anything? Master plan, you said it's a master plan.
And the 18-hour is referring to a objective to have businesses such as restaurants or whatever that are open and available to the public after business hours. But it
Yeah.
does not mean that any particular commercial investment property that seeks this grant must support an 18-hour
Yeah.
use.
They don't
That's
have to be
not
open
what that's
18
meant.
hours.
That's
They
not what-
just,
Mr.
we want
President,
we want downtown open from 6 to midnight. So we got a restaurant who's gonna come in and be open 6 to midnight. We got a breakfast restaurant who's gonna come in and be open
They
6 to
support the 18-hour day.
Mr.
Support the
President,
whole
But-
day.
Mr. President,
Please, one at a time.
So it's,
Okay, Commissioner Hayes.
my only thing is the wording, because it says will
It
in
makes it
here.
sound like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I looked at. It says will.
We could change it to could support.
Yeah, the wording might
Yeah.
be changed. If it was changed, I could live with that more. So you're demanding somebody stay open 18 hours a day.
Or may. Could put may.
Yeah, may or possible.
Yeah, we're gonna lock it in and say you have to. be able to
Whatever.
do it.
I don't think it needs to be locked in
No,
either,
that's what
but
it
that's what
sounds
was
like.
written. I
We
wanted
just
to,
need
yeah.
to change the verbiage on it.
Yeah.
Commissioner
Yeah.
Cox.
That's just an objective,
Yes.
but,
It doesn't read
you
that
know,
way.
you got one restaurant that's only open 12 and a half hours a week to the public, unless there's a holiday, so, and it's 10 hours. I mean, we can do better than
That,
that.
so we change that verbiage instead of will to
May.
may,
I can live with that.
fill everybody's cup.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
So I think, again, keeping in mind that that's just kind of the explanation, the broad policy objective. The policy objective with this grant, again, I think being to encourage Main Street downtown, the CRA, to be open for a much longer period of time. That helps on a lot of fronts. It keeps vandalism down, keeps property values up, makes the greatest economic use of the district for the longest period of time. It's like running 2 shifts, right? Your business or your building, it makes you more money if it's running 2 shifts. And so I think that's the idea here. I would leave your policy statement as it is. I would add within the specific program guidelines that the business that is to occupy the building that's going to be renovated or improved by this grant has to be open to the public a minimum of, insert the blank, number of hours outside of the regular operating hours of, and then insert the blank, presumably that's 8 to 5. So I would give them clear criteria, just like your economic development incentives that have job creation criteria. I would give clear criteria that they're going to extend the hours of use of the district, either, before 8 a.m. Again, it may be a donut shop that's going to open at 5 a.m. and bring people downtown, or a coffee shop, and it may be a restaurant that's going to be open until 10 p.m. at night. So after 5 p.m., whatever that criteria is, and then ask them to be open a certain minimum number of additional hours to qualify for the grant. I would consider very strongly that you look at including weekend hours as being outside of regular business hours, because my personal view is that that's one of the great challenges in the CRA right now is fostering that foot traffic in the district on the weekends. And for many of the business owners, it's the chicken or the egg argument. Are they going to be open if the people aren't there? And this could incentivize those businesses to have their doors open on those weekend hours, which I think would be good for the district. And then I would just add, going back to Dr. LaRosa's point from earlier, I think this is one of those grants that should probably come with it a minimum investment requirement. Because this is not a baseline. This is one of those big picture, long-term policy objectives. I would think you give this to someone who's coming in and making a relatively sizable investment in the district. Thank you, sir.
And can I say something?
We don't really know what the matching funds are, though.
The matching funds, I was just gonna suggest 25,000, that was the matching I was gonna do, y'all could raise that, y'all could do whatever you want. And in this being said, the purpose of these grants are to encourage something that's not already happening downtown. So that's kind of what this one does, what he says, is kind of encouraging people to be open after normal hours. And that's why the 18 hours a day is in here.
Thank you, Dr. LaRosa.
But it may confuse people. So, well, I can't be open 18 hours a day, so I can't apply for this. So I don't want them to think that they can't apply for this if they're not going to be open 18 hours. So I would like for the wording to say something kind of along the lines of what you said about after normal or different from your normal business hours, because we want to encourage other hours besides 8 to 5.
I think all of us know the intent.
Yes.
But I don't think.
We need to be
I don't
worded.
think that,
Verbiage is not.
yeah,
The
it doesn't
verbiage
explain it to the person applying for the grant.
Can
That's what you
we
wanna
just
do.
work on rewording that? We'll work on rewording that.
Of course, we can work on that, and I do think that we can use it as a way to prioritize grant applications. In other words, a business that's going to help with that objective and extend the workday into it, or the people coming over that 18 hours might be preferred over a business that's just 3 to 5 or some
Yeah.
section of the time that's already filled. So if they know that's what we're looking for, it may have help with the 18
You get done
hour
with this
day.
criteria, it's gonna be 3 pages long.
I'm
on
I don't
it.
think it has to be long, but we should make it clear that it doesn't have to be an 18-hour
What the
business,
intent
but
is,
it-
yes.
The intent for extra hours. And like I said, right now, I'm suggesting 25,000. If y'all want to up that to 50,000, 30,000, whatever y'all want to do, that's for y'all to decide, but I did suggest 25,000.
What are the thoughts of the fellow commissioners on having a minimum
Where it is.
investment in order to apply for
25.
this? No, that's the maximum they can apply for. How much they only have to invest 25,000 themselves?
Not really.
Okay, that's what I'm looking for.
Because it's like on
You're
the other
looking
one, it's
for a minimum.
250,000.
I'm looking, do we want that like we had on the first one? You have to
That
invest so
was-
much in order to apply for this. Do we want to have that criteria on this one?
That was a maximum or a minimum?
There was a minimum
Minimum.
they had to put in.
250,000 was their minimum for the commercial residential development. And with this one, I actually accidentally put it in on this one. I took it out because it wasn't in the plan. But this one, you can do it the same, that they have to actually, their minimum overall investment is 250,000.
I don't, that's high for somebody who's just gonna remodel a restaurant and
That's
they're
pretty
gonna
high.
remodel it to be open at night.
Yeah.
It's not gonna cost $250,000, but if they do it where maybe a $50,000 minimum investment for property and or building renovations, then you're gonna match them to the 25,000 and you don't.
Well, I don't think it has to be that high. Commissioner Cox, right?
I think it should be more like 100,000.
Mr. Chairman, if I may then respectfully, why the distinction between this one at 100,000 and the first one at 250,000? In other words, I mean, which are we consciously placing greater value on the 18-hour day as opposed to the mixed use? Because technically the mixed use kind of achieves the 18 hours. or are they roughly equivalent? If so, and it may be the 250 is too high. I'm just saying, I think we need to consider, why we have 250 on the first one if we're going to set an alternate number on this item. And I would note for the small operators that are going to come in and do a modest renovation, they're still going to be able to pick up the $10,000 facade grant. So let's don't forget that one's floating out there, which is I would say kind of maybe your most generic in nature. They're also going to be able to get all of that kind of the core building compliance items are going to be able to get that under the $25,000. So there's $35,000 that operator has potentially that they could pull down without even focusing in on any of those big picture specific policy objectives.
And that does bring up a question. And let's say like 250,000 on the first one. We require them to do 250,000. Well, is part of that, say they get 3 grants, is part of that 250,000 a matching for the other grants?
Plus, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Commissioner Fairclough.
the first one we spoke about, was mixed-use residential and commercial.
Yeah.
This is
commercial.
just commercial. It's gonna be considerably more to build residential, housing, for the lack of a better term, in the first example than it is in this example. Considerably larger investment, I would think.
Well, and it kind of depends. On this one, if it's a restaurant, that's very expensive. If the other one's just a gift shop and a resident, gift shop's not as expensive to
I
build.
was just under the impression it was going to be rental apartments.
Well, yeah, I mean, it could be. But the downstairs could be a gift shop. That's not as expensive to build as a restaurant. That's for y'all. If y'all want to put 100,000 on each of them, to me, if they're going to invest, 100,000 is a good investment downtown.
But do you wanna discourage people who only need to spend 50,000
Yeah.
from applying? If somebody wants to open a gift shop and renovate an old building for $25,000, they're not gonna be eligible for this. Maybe they're gonna be open at night, but if we set them at $100,000, then they may not come in because they're not gonna spend 100, but they can't afford to spend 25.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, though, let's do that math though. So one, your building acquisition cost is counted, right?
Yeah.
So on day one, you come in, you can't really find a building in the district that's halfway decent at this point for under 100,000. There's one that's pending right now. My office has the contracts, 115,000, about 800 or 900 square foot. So I'll use that as an example. So they're going to build that gift shop. So they've met that threshold now. If you set that threshold at 100,000, they've met the threshold simply through their purchase costs. So now they can come in, they can apply for a $10,000 facade grant. If they spend $10,000 in facade, they can get up to $25,000 in matching to upgrade their electrical, maybe upgrade their HVAC, improve their roof, put in new windows, do all of those things that are going to bring them up to code compliance. That's $35,000. And then if you set that bar below $100,000 at this grant, they can now pull in another $25,000, so they're at $60,000 that they're going to pull down from the CRA to put a gift shop in Crestview that's going to be open late in the evenings when your annual budget's $180,000. And so I think it's really important to keep in mind that we could undersell. We have the luxury of sitting right now on this reserve, but when you look forward, that math doesn't work the same. Just because your annual costs for the existing contracts for the CRA, your actual available annual budget that you can dedicate to these programs that's not being pulled from reserves is relatively modest. And I think you have to be very cautious about ensuring that you're using it to incentivize to the maximum extent possible the most redevelopment in the district. And I don't think that $60,000 on a single gift shop is going to maximize your incentive capability, because effectively that's one full year's worth of available incentive monies in your current straight year budget once you've taken into account all of your contract obligations.
So the
Go
question,
ahead, Councilman Hayes.
Mr. President, I don't want
Commissioner Hayes, my bad.
I don't want to prolong this, but for me personally, this is something that I haven't grasped fully yet. I appreciate the comments from Commissioner Boyle. It gave me a little bit more insight, but this is something I think we need to do a little bit more research into and come back with some estimated figures of what it does for different things and then look at it. Right now, I can't come up with a figure myself.
Well, that's the purpose of the workshop, though,
Yeah,
is
that's
to
right.
float out ideas out.
Well, I don't have enough information. Basically, you can throw prices out at me, but like I said, a gift shop versus a restaurant, you know, that's just me personally. I just haven't grasped the money aspect of it, of what the figure should be at, until somebody gives me more information. And I'm here open for that.
Commissioner Fairclough, you were next. And then you.
I spoke to a prospective restaurateur not long ago who had his eye on a building on Main Street. And he told me that after taking the tour of that facility, that it was going to cost him between $50,000 and $75,000 just to do the kitchen.
Yep, I know what you mean.
All right. So, when I started my business, of course, that was years ago, I had a $50,000 investment for fixtures and shelving and interior design and stuff. And, but I would shudder to think what that would cost today. And, I don't know, I'm stuck on 100,000. I think that sounds fair.
For the minimum investment for this and the other one?
Yeah.
Or just this one and
Oh,
leave 250
well,
for
just
the
this
other
is, this is the one on the table right
one? Okay,
now. This
all right,
is-
just want to get clarification. Commissioner Cox, you're next.
Yeah, I reiterate, I'm for 100,000 minimum to get this. And if we went with a lesser figure, then the matching grant should not be that large. So I think
25,000 matching, leave it at 25,000 matching grant?
only if it's 100,000 minimum.
Well, and that's
And
what,
appreciate what
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Boyle said.
Go ahead.
And that's one thing, the whole purpose of this is to encourage people to invest downtown. So we don't want to do anything that would discourage them or make them think that they can't have the money. And yes, I think 100,000, I mean, you're going to invest that. But if they already own the building, does it count that they've already owned the building? They just want to upgrade it and change it? But that's for y'all to decide. I mean, to me, my thoughts are the 100,000. They're going to invest 100,000. If they're a commercial developer, they're going to invest that much. And if y'all want to leave it at that, we can do that and just do the 25,000.
Mr. Chairman, I would just exclude acquisition costs. I think 100,000 is reasonable if you exclude acquisition costs. I think including acquisition costs skews the game, frankly, against folks who already have a building downtown, who may then come out of the woodwork to participate in these policies. So take acquisition costs off the table and make sure it's just new money being invested into the building.
Exclude acquisition cost.
Everybody
I
understand
think
that?
that's a good idea.
I could go with that.
Yeah, I can live with that.
Go with that? All right. Did you get what we're going with on
Yes,
that? Okay, good.
I hope so.
$100,000 minus acquisition cost. All right. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, the last one is simple, same as before.
I hope so.
Well, it's the facade
16
grant.
minutes.
Facade grant, 10,000, nothing about this has changed. It's just a matching grant for
Oh, yeah.
10,000. Nothing on this has changed from what y'all had in the past.
That is a good-looking Airstream.
I like
I tried to get a good picture of somebody who
Yeah.
received a facade grant.
I would, Mr. Chairman, we actually sold that project here just recently closed. One of the operators that's currently on site bought it, and we're excited they're going to be a kind of an owner-operator that'll really be able to take that site to the next level. I think it's
Awesome. So it's
going
staying.
to be a great
Good.
addition to downtown
I
Crestview.
didn't know Megan had been associated at Yards here with all this cooking equipment. I said, well, she must have given up her
It's,
her-
the restaurant business, as y'all know from friends you have, I'm sure the restaurant business is tough, and it's
yeah.
tough in downtown
It is.
Crestview.
Yeah.
Really is.
Any comments, questions on the facade grant with the little still under the sea to make it soft?
With that cute
It
little
looks
C
great to me,
thing.
Mr. President. We can move on.
Okay.
I have a question
Yeah,
for
go ahead,
Commissioner Boyles
Commissioner
about the little dangly thing.
He wants proof that that's what it is.
If you take that thing off, is it facade?
I think it would be. Okay. At this point, I would call on the public. If anybody in the audience would like to address the CRA Commissioners, please identify yourself or forever hold your peace. Yeah, come on up, identify your name and address.
Sure, Bill Tonin. I'm residing at 196 West Pine Avenue above the Costa Restaurant. And I just wanted to make one observation that I think some of the points of logic policy-wise behind the prior grant that we're talking about, the commercial investment, when it was deemed 18-hour day and so forth, I think it was as Commissioner Boyles mentioned, the idea of incentivizing certain restaurants and businesses of that sort versus other ones. The Retail Strategies Group that met with you all 2 years ago, and I think the other group that met with you this year, some of the nuggets they came out with was for economic development to occur across a broad band of businesses, there were 2 or 3 that were like the first starters that would be anchors for other businesses. And I would just say in that analysis, those 2 analyses, what the prior CRA director emphasized as well were restaurants that meet that extended hours, weekend hours, are a huge economic impact. So amongst all the other kinds of businesses, office suites and yarn shops and gift card centers and so forth, restaurants employ a lot of people. So there's lots of jobs that come. So that's an economic value to the community. Restaurants pay a lot of payroll taxes, real estate taxes, they're buying equipment, so they're economic engines that do a lot of impact for an area. As well, they bring in people to downtown. So just as a kind of a short aside, Caspa Coffee Company, which is open from 6:30 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, Monday to Friday. Sometimes we're open a little later, and then on Saturday we have a short day, 7:30 to 3. We have about, on average, 200 customers a day. They're coming down to Caspa Coffee Company. There's virtually nothing else around us, so they're coming into downtown. If there were 10 Caspa Coffees, doing the same, not coffee shops, but restaurants doing the same impact, it may be something like 2,000 people coming downtown. So just kind of as a multiplier effect, then people go to a restaurant, it's an anchor, but it's a hub of activity. Then they'll take time to go to the yarn shop and they'll get the dog trimmed or whatever else along the way and along the line. Commissioner Boyles was correct as well. The 18-hour day is a concept, so there are, it brings in safety, it brings in traffic. So it's almost like if you don't build it, they won't come, for sure, right? We already know that. We see that. So I would say not all businesses are equal. And we've got good friends doing all sorts of good businesses, but restaurants should have a heavier weighting or a heavier incentivized plan in your all's thinking because of the economic impact. Again, we've seen so many businesses come and go and didn't get the roots down. And I think in terms of where you go from here, maybe one pass at criteria, especially for that commercial investor grant, might be for those that have a greater impact. So number of employees coming into the market. My little shop has 15 to 20, gusts up to 20, that sort of thing. It does change all the time. But those jobs weren't there before. So if every business was evaluated on, hey, how many jobs are you bringing in for the dollars the city's going to invest, that would be one criteria. So if you will, jobs are, all the politicians tell you that too, right? Jobs. Jobs are a big deal. They are for my employees. Taxes that go back into the CRA. So I don't want to see the CRA fund just do this. I mean, I want to see the tax base grow and then more money comes back into the CRA. That's an objective that we all should have. The economy is vibrant and property values go up. We want to reverse the trend. So that's where I would go with it. My 2 cents. Appreciate all your time. I know these are tough decisions and you all got to deal with a lot of input. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill. Any other comments from the audience? If not, I just want to close with a reminder that each of us is tasked with bringing a nominee for the grants committee at our next meeting. And we were going to the CRA meeting, right? Next CRA meeting, we're supposed to have someone that we're going to appoint to the CRA Grants Board.
And I had a question about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do they need to be from inside the city limits of Crestview or just in the area?
I don't, since we didn't have a board like this before, I don't know we set that criteria.
Some of our boards do in the city and some of them don't. The majority of them, you have to be a city resident or own a business within the city. So I would say they would need to have some interest in the city of Crestview, whether it's a business or whether it's a, we haven't set that criteria for that board yet, we'll have that too. But I would say they need to have some interest in the city of Crestview. They don't need to be from Niceville, they don't need to be from Baker, unless they own a business in the city of Crestview. But I would say they need to have some,
If they just work inside the city limits and live,
I'd say work or own a business or.
And I think what you want is a familiarity with the city so that they can have an understanding of what the needs are and what might work and what might not work. That's why you want someone who's familiar with the city.
Do you have an application?
we have a committee application on the website, we just don't have one specifically for this one.
Does it ask kind of interest and background? I think you might be able to, I don't get an appointment, but I think that you might find that helpful to vet them. I would leave your criteria relatively broad and then allow their sell points to sell themselves. They should be able to show that connectivity and interest, and I think that'll allow you to make an informed decision. Just have a standardized application where they have to kind of list that criteria, maybe even a kind of a short form resume or something to that effect.
Would you send that application, you have a copy of that, do you? Would you send it out to all of us?
But I'll send it out.
Yeah, send it out, so we can examine that.
I have a question. Does that mean that they need to be here when y'all appoint them? Do they need to sell themselves to y'all?
No, I think they need to sell them to them and then they just appoint.
They don't need to be here that day, so.
No, I don't believe so. You done? Okay, thank you all for coming. Meeting's adjourned.